Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Welcome to Journey Through the Gate. Tonight we have a very special episode. It is one of our spooktacular Boo Bash episodes. We're trying to bring you as many experiences as we can, as entertaining and fun, and, kick back as we can. So we have a listener on with us tonight. He is a listener of Journey Through the Gate, and he has had a lifetime of experiences with the uncanny. I think it's going to be very interesting tonight, and I'd like to welcome aboard Stephen. Come on.
Hello.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Fantastic.
Good. You ready to tell us some stories about some of the stuff you've seen and things that have happened and all that cool stuff?
Yeah, I am ready.
Outstanding. And tonight we have on, my wonderful friend, my sometime co-host, my buddy, my pal in the paranormal. We have on Mr. Steve Stockton tonight. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Cisco. Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
Glad to be here. It's maybe a little confusing with the Steve and the Stephen tonight, but
I've got a chalkboard, and I'm trying to keep track. I'll go try to keep track. But you know what? If I say, "Hey, Steve, what do you think about it?" and Stephen answers, we're just going to wait.
Yeah,
we're just going to relax and have a good time.
We're just one big happy family.
Exactly.
Hey, we're two Southern gentlemen, so we'll probably be in a standoff to see who's the more polite.
There you go. Yeah, I can hear some South there. Now, you're from Alabama, right?
I am born and raised.
Okay, good deal.
Mm-hmm. And he's kind of a neighbor.
Fun places down there.
He's kind of a neighbor to both of us because Steve you lived in Tennessee most of your life, did you not? I mean, I know you've been all over, but... Yeah,
I grew up in East Tennessee. Yeah, I had cousins that lived in Scottsboro, Alabama, so I used to travel down there frequently. And, of course, being the turn that I was, had to go to the Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville and all that good stuff. But yeah, always have good memories of Alabama.
Scottsboro is beautiful country. I was just there Thursday.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've been back, but I lived not very far from Scottsboro. I lived right on the Tennessee line, so I guess that's where I'm going to be sitting, right between the two of you, Tennessee and Alabama, sitting on that line again between the two. I'll tell you what, I miss the South. I'm in Jersey now, and I've lived just as long I was born and raised in New Jersey, and I'd lived just as long in Alabama after I got out of the military as I had in New Jersey. So I'm about half and half, I'm a little mixture of both. So it's going to be a fun evening. Now, we brought Steve Stockton on. Not only you have heard him before on other shows, and you're familiar with his books and his stories, and I thought it was fantastic to bring him on to help us with this tonight. And that's to you, Stephen, correct? You've heard about...
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, yes. It's an honor. I'm a huge fan of Mr. Stockton's, and I'm kind of late.
Stephen. The check's in the mail.
I'm kind of late in the game to the paranormal stuff. I never really got into researching it and listen to the podcast and stories until stuff really happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lot.
Yeah, I remember kind of when you got that started, and that's a little bit, I'm going to go ahead, if you don't mind, I'm going to tell the listeners a little bit about it. It was so funny in this, when you start doing podcasts and you start getting involved with other podcasts and radio shows and stuff, I had been kind of a helper to Tony and Jenny on Real Ghost Stories Online. And they would get phone calls or, and I would listen, and then I would call and talk to Tony or Jenny afterwards or during the show and give them, kind of my idea, trying to help them help the people and trying to figure out, unravel all, the different paranormal stories. And I remembered Stephen called in and told a story, and I remembered it. And about, 4, maybe 5 years later, you had commented on one of my YouTube videos, and we got to talking, and then you started telling me your story, and I was like, hold on a minute. I remember hearing this. Yeah. I said, did you ever call in? And sure enough, it was you. So it's a real small world, not only in, visiting states we're all familiar with and stories we're familiar with, but also in the paranormal world, too. When you start reaching out, connecting in, sometimes you're remembered for that unique experience. And I just thought that was so cool to find each other again. I thought that was really neat. So
it is. It's awesome.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
It was kind of neat to get together and do this. So here we go. You told me that you've kind of had experiences, at least with the uncanny. Let's call it that for now. A lot of your life. Do you want to tell us what the first thing you went through that kind of got you interested? I know you said you came later in life to investigating, but you didn't come later in life to having experiences. What was the first ones?
Yeah, the first thing that ever happened to me, and it kind of always had a lasting effect. One night I was asleep. I was probably about 12. And I had some other things happen before that I kind of really don't really want to talk about that. And there's some things I just, don't feel comfortable talking about.
That's fine.
But this experience, I was asleep, and I woke up out of a dead sleep and was just facing in the direction of my dresser, which had a mirror attached to the back of it. And there was a little girl. She almost looked like a doll, and she just had a real pale, cold, dead stare, and she was just looking right at me, eye-to-eye contact, and I just jumped out of the bed and ran to my parents' room, and I slept with them for the night.
Mm. I can't imagine. I've had experiences like that too, but you hear somebody else's story, and it's hard to imagine, what they went through, even though you went through similar things. Cold, dead stare. Did you have to run by her to get out the door?
I didn't pay any attention. I just jumped
took
and
off.
ran.
Yeah, because that's it always gets me when they're standing in the door, or you have to run past them to get out the door. Is why I ask, because those are even extra creepy, because you almost want to go out the window. Did you ever hear of anything in the house that anybody else had seen anything, or no?
No, not really.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't live there very long.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that really happened then.
Mm-hmm.
And later, my wife and I, we've been married about 20 years. And when we were dating, I had a little apartment that it used to be a hospital, and a guy wound up refurbishing it and turning it into, it's pretty much a big house with a lot of apartments in it. And I had a lot of family issues around that time, so I wound up quitting school when I was about 16 years old, and I kept the apartment that we lived in, and I worked washing dishes and whatever I could do to make money to pay the bills. But I've been on my own since I was 16. But I said all that to say this: in that apartment, we had a lot of strange things happen. There was a light that was on the wall, like about the size of a nickel. And it didn't come from anywhere. It didn't shine through the window. It was just on the wall. And one night, my wife was there. She was my then girlfriend. And we were laying in the bed watching some TV. And I said, man, I'm really tired of that light. I wish it would go away. It's weird. And after that, I never saw it again. And I had instances in there where doors would slam, like very loud, and there would be nobody there but me, and that was kind of freaky. But the nail in the coffin, so to speak, was whenever I was laying in bed, and I wasn't asleep. I was listening to the radio, and something grabbed the covers and just pulled them completely off of me, because usually your first response, if something freaky happens in the night, you want to grab the covers and go over your head with them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I could feel something physically grab the covers and just snatch them off of me, just in one fell swoop.
Mm.
And after that night, I told her, I said, look, you're going to have to move in with me, or I'm moving in with you and your mom. That was too much. That was too much.
That I can imagine. Did she ever experience anything there, or?
She saw the light.
Okay.
Well, other than that,
I've got a couple reasons I'm asking that.
Mm-hmm.
One, I know a lot of people that had experiences, you know, like you say, from younger, and obviously there's some, and I totally respect that you don't want to talk about. It's really good when you've got somebody who is seeing something too, or at least believing you, and you can talk to them. That's huge.
Now, she did say some things with me later on, like before we bought our first house. We moved in with her grandmother, and her grandmother, her husband, well, I guess was my wife's grandfather, he passed away suddenly, and he lived in one end of the house, and she lived in the other end of the house, and they were kind of like ships passing in the night, you know. But after he passed, we decided to move in with her to kind of help with things, and it also helped us to save money for down payments and all that good stuff and buying your first home. And we had some really weird things happen. Like, I always left for work before she did, and in the living room area, all the left cabinets were open one morning, and there was nobody there but me, my wife, and her grandmother. So the left closet door was open, all the left cabinet doors were open. And when I walked through and saw that, I was a bit taken back, you know, and I thought, man, maybe she's just messing with me. So I closed them and took on off to work. Well, when I got home that evening, I asked her, I said, yeah, that was a funny thing you did with those closets and the cabinet doors. And she said, oh my gosh. She said, I didn't do that, but I thought you did that, because evidently they were all back open after I left for work. So she experienced that. And along with that, I started seeing like balls of light around her grandmother's house. There's a big strip of woods right in front of her house and a house on the other side. Well, I thought I was losing my mind or just seeing things, but I mean, sure enough, they were little balls of light about the size of a softball or maybe a little bigger. And they wouldn't fall out of the sky like an object would, like I guess a meteor fragment or whatever. I mean, it looked like it had intent and, you know, a will or intelligence behind it,
mm-hmm.
because they would move kind of erratically through the trees, like weaving through the branches and stuff, and there would be several of them. Well, I kept telling my wife about it. I said, man, you have got to see this. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. It was all the time, because at that time I was a smoker, and, you know, Mama didn't have no smoking in the house. So whenever I'd go out to smoke in the evenings, I would see it about the same time. One night I had friends over, and we were outside smoking, and I just happened to be looking at the right place at the right time, and there was a big one, and it was probably, I would say maybe 5 foot in diameter. It was huge. And it just kind of zipped in to my sight and zipped out for probably the whole length of the house. And it was bright, like almost like lightning or plasma light. And all the guys, they saw the flash from it. Well, her cousin and his fiance came over one night, and they were all into ghosts and, you know, spooky stuff. And I told them about it, and they were like flipping out. They said, "Oh gosh, well, I've got to see it." I said, "Look, if we go outside right now, I bet you we will see something." And they said, "No way, no way." So we go outside, and sure enough, they were everywhere, just falling through the trees and in the yard. So they were witnesses to that. We kind of talk about it, like it was a family function. Hey, remember that time?
Yeah.
So that happened, and that's
That's
it was
amazing.
just weird.
Now, how long were you there, and how long did everybody keep seeing these lights? Like over what time span?
We lived there probably about 6 or 7 months.
Okay. And that whole time you were seeing them right around the same time, and that one you said went through the house or went through the yard? The big one?
It was above the house,
Ooh.
right above the house.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, Steve, you know a lot about phantom lights and things like that. What are you thinking on this story?
The way it was describing them, it reminds me a lot of the Brown Mountain lights in North Carolina. When I lived in extreme Upper East Tennessee, I was just a short drive away from Brown Mountain. I used to go over there and see those regularly in the summer and the fall. And that's the way they were. They looked like they had an intelligence. They would, sometimes you'd see them like weaving in among the trees. Other times they might shoot up into the air, come across the Wiseman's Gorge there. But I've never seen one that big. That would be impressive to see, like a 5-foot ball. Like,
yeah.
And orbs and stuff that people capture on camera.
Mm-hmm.
Well, back when me and my wife, was first starting out, we didn't have a lot of money, so the best camera we could muster was, the disposable cameras and stuff. So we would take pictures of, Christmas get-togethers and stuff, and we had Christmas at her grandmother's house, the same house that, I was talking about. And I have a picture of me and my wife, and there's a big orb behind us. And I have another picture where her aunt is doing a funny dance, and there's an orb behind her. So it kind of proves that it's not just a camera glitch or malfunction, because her body was actually overlapping the orb behind her.
Wow. That's amazing. I tend to, I don't know, Steve might think different, but I think the orbs are probably something different. Usually when there's gatherings like that, family, and it's not unusual to have orbs around, whether it be family members visiting, if you know what I mean, or people, or just being drawn to that energy of celebrating a holiday and a get-together. I think the outside, balls of light are a little bit different, it sounds to me, and they probably looked different to you too. They probably looked like they were just made out of, light energy, like you said, like a plasma ball, or, that kind of thing. I think the orbs inside in the pictures are probably, very much human entities, something like that, visiting, hanging around, where I think the outside lights are different. I don't know. What do you think, Steve? That's just my take.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
It makes you wonder. The house that I grew up in, and we built the house, so unless the ground, was haunted or something, there was no real history there in the house itself. But when I was little, like 4 or 5 years old, and this was the South, we had what was called the good living room. And that was off limits. That's where, if company came over, that's where you went and sat. And then we had a regular living room with a TV and stuff in the other part of the house. Well, one day I was kind of between the kitchen and the dining room, and I was looking into the good living room. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And there were these little tiny lights, looked like Christmas lights, but about the size of a firefly. And they're different colors, red, blue, green, yellow, but it wasn't around the holidays or anything. There wasn't any decorations in there. And I'm standing there watching them, and my dad's like, what are you looking at? What are you seeing? And I described them to him, and he couldn't see them. So
wow.
I always thought that weird. And then another house that I lived in Oak Ridge, we used to see down the hallway little just pinpricks of light. It looked like a little tiny flash bulb about the size of the head of a pin would go off in different parts of the hallway. That house had a lot of weird activity. So I don't know if it's some kind of energy or, scientifically you could say a static discharge or something, but, when it moves like it has purpose or like there's some control in it. Now, I've seen ball lightning too. Ball lightning is totally different. One time we were sitting at my grandmother's house, and this in itself was weird enough. Huge storm came up out of nowhere. She had the window open, just a crack, and you could hear the rain and stuff outside. All of a sudden, there's a big boom, lightning had hit a tree out in the yard, and this ball of light, probably about the size of a ping pong ball, zips through that crack in the window. And as it came into the house, it was getting bigger and bigger, and you could hear it like sizzling, and you could smell ozone and stuff. It went diagonally across the living room and then kind of made almost a 90-degree turn, went into the fireplace and exploded. Pop! And I was like, what was that? That was my first experience with ball lightning.
Wow.
But said it was totally different, even though it sort of seemed like it was being steered by something else as well with some of those turns and things it was making. So I don't know. I mean, it exists, but I like the theory about relatives coming to visit. I've heard that one posited several times, particularly around the holidays and stuff. I used to have a thing that happened to me when I was a kid where I would see a feather. I think I've told you that story, Cisco. Just a little, like goose down feather, maybe an inch long, and it would float all over the house, and I would try to catch it, and it would always just be out of my grasp. And then I was talking to a guy one time, and he was telling me some of his stories. He had almost the exact same story, that he would see a feather in the house, try to catch it, couldn't get it, it would always stay out of reach and then disappear. But in his instance, his grandfather, before he passed away, told him that he would come back and check on him every now and then, and he would appear as a feather.
Wow.
So
Wow.
makes you wonder.
It's beautiful, though. Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories of light, the light, and it's hard to understand. When Stephen tells the story, I really feel like I'm getting and of course these are all theories and they're all guesses and I don't know anything, but I'm getting the feeling of like an elemental kind of thing, just hanging out, and maybe in some ways they, can be a collective energy where they can go move together, and that's why sometimes it was bigger. But I definitely feel like, it was something along those lines, and I feel like the orbs inside might have very well been, something in the house, a human spirit or a visiting spirit or something like that. Of course, we'll never know, and that's why it makes this subject so interesting. But
yeah, that's the fun, is to the conjecture, to think it's this.
Yeah.
We have.
I mean, how do you feel about that, Stephen? Do you feel like that was this kind of feeling you were getting off of it? I mean, I know you a little bit, and I know that you're probably real good at reading energy. I mean, it didn't scare you, did it? I mean, it was amazing, but you didn't get a fear off of it.
The big one was not necessarily fear. I was more startled,
right,
and just kind of in awe of it. Like, hey, I'm shocked. I can't believe this is happening,
right,
kind of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like I said, they're all just really theories, and the deeper the theory you're going to get from, parapsychologists and, scientists and things like this. But just from my experience, that feels like what it is. I've heard an awful lot of story about phantom lights and lights that follow train tracks and things like that. But when you get in the wood line like that, and they're kind of hanging in the wood line and going in and out the trees, I kind of get an elemental kind of feel there, like a, more of a nature spirit, or just spirits that are out there hanging out, But usually they've got that kind of energy to be that bright. They've been around a while, more than just a human spirit kind of thing. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just guessing. But that's amazing. Now, you moved away from there. I know you've had other experiences too. When did you start seeing things in the sky that were a little different?
I will I will try to put everything in the chronological order
Okay, go ahead.
as they happen.
You take the
All right.
reins. You go.
Okay. I had a really incredible experience one night. You know, I've had some terrible things happen, but this is probably one of the most amazing, awesome things that's happened to me. My wife's father, who's now passed on, he was in the hospital. He had to have open heart surgery, kind of like in an emergency fashion. So I was here at the house by myself, and there wasn't anything going on that would have provoked this, or there was nothing that I did that brought it on. But I was I was laying on the couch watching some preaching videos on YouTube. I'm an ordained minister and have been for probably about 13 years, 12, 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
I also work as a chaplain for hospice. And at the time, I was watching the YouTube videos of this guy preaching. And all of a sudden, I just had a flood of joy that was absolutely surprising to me, because I never have felt anything like this, and it was powerful. Like, I felt like I could just punch an Amtrak train and just knock it cold. It's just how incredible it was. And I mean, I just went from laughing uncontrollably to running and jumping all around the house, and I'm just not that kind of person. But it was just phenomenal. It was amazing. And I was just weeping uncontrollably because I couldn't believe this was happening. Now, some folks will call it getting happy in the Lord. Some people call it being filled with the Holy Ghost. But I really fully believe with all my heart that I had an encounter with God right here in my house. And as I was running down the hall, I saw an oval shape. It was a perfect oval shape. And it was a cloud that looked kind of like the most purest, crystal clear water that you've ever seen. And there were little golden specks in it. It looked like there was just glitter scattered all about the oval. And it was so bright. The light that came out of the little gold specks was so bright that it would hurt your eyes to look at, like looking at the sun almost. And it kind of put me in mind of if you've ever been to the river on a bright, sunshiny day, the way that the light reflects, like off of the water or off of like a reflective metallic surface.
Mm-hmm.
And if the light beams in your eyes, it just burns and hurts, you know. So I just walked right through the oval, and it was almost like somebody put a blanket over my face, and it obstructed my vision. Like whatever I walked through stayed on my face. It was on me. And at this point, I kind of got a little afraid because I didn't really know or understand what was going on. And I thought, hey, maybe I might die, you know. I know it sounds crazy, but there's a verse in Scripture that just come to my mind. And I thought, you know, Moses always wanted to see the face of God. And then God told Moses that no man could look upon his face and live. And you know, it really would not have surprised me if he wouldn't have just walked right around the corner and there he would be. And I was thinking, gosh, man, I've got a baby on the way. Like at any given time, my wife, she was, you know, right at, you know, almost 9 months pregnant. And there was a lot going on. And, I mean, it eventually kind of subsided, but I mean, it blew my mind then, and it blows my mind now because it's just kind of a unknown thing. But my theory on what that was is, you know, and I don't mean to get preachy or anything, but it's just, man, it's just who I am and how I perceive
Right,
the
just
world.
tell
You
your
know, through
heart,
that
hon.
lens.
Just tell your heart. Just tell it like it is. Go ahead.
Well, years later, I always reflected back on that, and I kind of felt like what I saw in that hallway was what's referred to as the Shekinah glory of God, which is like, it's the glory that surrounds God that actually protects people from seeing that. Like when the priest would go into the Holy of Holies, that's what was in there, the glory of God. And when I think back, that oval was just large enough for a person to stand behind, and you wouldn't be able to see them if they were hiding behind it, you know.
Mm.
But that's just my thoughts, you know.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I'm glad you didn't die.
It's amazing. I got goosebumps off that one.
I know. I know. Have you ever heard of anything like that, Steve?
Oh yeah, my brother was a charismatic minister, and talk about getting happy in the church and stuff. That's the way it was pretty much every service at the church that he had.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was there one Sunday, and there was a guy in from the military just on leave. I think he was from the Air Force or something, and they asked him to get up and sing a song. Now, this wasn't your regular church where you had an organ and singing out of the red hymn book. They had basically a rock band that played in church, and they had a praise team that waved flags and did all this stuff. Well, this guy gets up there and starts singing I'll Fly Away a cappella, and I'm telling you, we almost did. There was just, that's one of the most powerful moves I've ever felt of the Spirit of God that way. It just, you could see it moving across the church in waves. And the band played and people sang I'll Fly Away for like 3 hours. We never even got to the preaching. It was wild. But you in a few meetings like that, it spoils you. You go to a different church or, maybe something that's just a little drier, a little more, and it just it doesn't quite do it for you after having those kind of experiences. And a lot of times my brother would go out in the woods and pray. I mean, sometimes for hours, and he would talk about seeing what he thought was the Shekinah glory of God. He said he was out praying one time and he saw this, almost like you described, kind of an oval or an egg shape, and he said it was shimmering. Just there in the air. It was dimensional, but he said it looked like almost exactly what you said, like light shining on the water, but it was just hanging in the air. And he said there were other times when he would be praying and stuff and feel the Spirit move, and he would see like a blue smoke. He said it would get hazy sometimes where he was praying, like a fog almost would come out of nowhere. And then he attributed that to the Spirit of God there. It's fascinating, and just some of the stories that I've heard and things that I've seen and experienced, it changes your perspective on things.
Well, there you go. How about that? It's nice to have what you saw validated by somebody you've never met, somebody they know saw similar, and that's got to feel pretty good.
Yes, that's amazing, man, because I've never heard anybody else that had an experience like that, and I knew when it was happening. I thought, this is something special in it, and I'm not trying. I mean, it's definitely not because of me, and it happened for a purpose, and I mean, I know what that purpose is. Getting into the other experiences that I had shortly after my son was born. I was working at a local paper mill right outside of town here, and they worked rotating swing shifts, and I wound up just working on my off days all the time, and I didn't really have any choice in the matter. And at the time, I mean, I was making great money, and I just thought, hey, I've got a new baby. I want to be able to be at home at night to, be able to protect my family and to be here and to be a part of things. So I wound up taking about a $10 an hour pay cut to go to work at this a little plastics factory that was owned by, two fellas. One guy was really nice, and the other guy was probably one of the most negative and abrasive people that I've ever met. And just the kind of person that I am. I don't like confrontation, and I don't, when somebody's negative, I usually try to cheer them up and to just really be as nice as possible, to them. And just, kind of try to win them over that way. And that's how I've always been. I've never been a person that liked arguing or fighting, or I just don't like that kind of stuff. And this guy, as soon as I started, he just would ride me and would cuss me out and belittle me all the time. And for a few months, on the way to work, I'd pray for the guy, and I would pray that he'd have a good day, that he'd be in a good mood, and I'd pray that God would help me to have a positive attitude. Well, that stuff started to really chip away at me, and I just found myself really being bitter, and I just hated the guy. And I'm ashamed to admit it now, but I started really having hateful feelings for the guy, and it really upset me, because I thought, man, this is not me, and this is not how I'm supposed to react to people like this, And I felt bad about it. And so I asked the guy, I invited him to church one day, and I could tell that he was having a really terrible day, and he was quiet. And I could tell that something was bothering him, and he was kind of upset. So I just thought, hey, man, would you like for me to pray with you or something, And he said, no, that's fine, And I invited him to church, and he said, no, we don't go to church. My wife is a witch. She's into witchcraft. And I didn't know if he was being serious or just trying to kind of be like, yeah, I'm not interested. But just like almost the very day that he said that, I started experiencing strange things. Like when I went home, later that night at home, I used to always walk around my house outside and pray, because it was, that's just what I like to do, because it's quiet and it's peaceful and there's nobody to hear or, to interrupt you. And it's just my time to reflect, So I was walking around my house, and right outside my bedroom window, and I could go outside right now and put an X on the ground where this took place. But the closer I would get to this spot outside my window, I would just get a very sickening feeling like there is something evil just standing right there, and it never moved, and it was never anywhere else. It was always in that same spot. And so a couple of days after I started, experiencing that, and that's something that lasted the whole duration of the whole episode of what I'm about to tell you. It was always there. So shortly thereafter, I recognized that and started experiencing that. We had strange things happen, like when we were in bed, I could feel something jump on the bed that was about the size of like a medium-sized dog, like maybe 50-pound dog or something. And it would just leap up on the bed and be in one spot. And sometimes when it did, it would kind of graze my leg. And it would really rattle my cage. And we have a Tempur-Pedic bed, the one where, somebody's got a glass of wine sitting on the mattress and they drop a bowling ball on the other side. And, but it was such a real physical event that my wife was able to tell that something was jumping on the bed. Like, she experienced that. And then there would be times that as I fell asleep, and I knew that I was asleep, I would be awoke by a feeling of, I mean, I can't really explain it, but it felt like something was trying to take my life from me, like to suck me out of my body.
Mm.
And it was terrifying. I mean, I could feel it creep up right behind my neck, and I mean, it was like on me, and it felt like it was trying to take my spirit out of my body.
Jeez.
And one night, I was asleep on the couch. A lot of times, I would just fall asleep on the couch. And this is where most of the events happened, was on the couch. But I remember being woke up by a like just a sickening feeling. Like it was the same feeling that I got outside when I walked near that spot. But it was just like pure hatred and evil and just like pure wickedness. And I was frozen. Like I could move my eyes around and scan the room, but I was like scared because I couldn't move. I thought, am I having a stroke? Or, because I've never had anything like that happen before. And I was startled and scared. And then all of a sudden, this black smoke would creep up behind the couch, kind of like you would see in a scary movie, with fog. But it was a black smoke, and it was so thick, like it looked like black velvet, like you can't see through it. It wasn't translucent, and it assumed the form, like it kind of formed a huge, giant person, and it was just like a silhouette. There were no facial features, and you couldn't see through it. But it leaned over the couch and put its face right on my face, and like. It was so close, it was touching my face and like turned my head a little bit. It was like right in my face. And it put its forearm over my chest, kind of like a seatbelt would, go right over across your chest,
Uh-huh.
And it pushed me down in the couch, like I could hear it squeaking and cracking and springs buckling under the pressure. And it felt like a Volkswagen Bug or something. It was so heavy and so strong and powerful. And, that's scary enough, but like the worst part of that experience is the feeling and the emotion that come out of this thing.
Mm.
Like it hated me big time, like a furious anger and hatred. And, it snapped one of the little support wooden struts or whatever in the couch, because it's like a double recliner kind of couch,
Mm-hmm.
And it actually broke one of the wooden slats under there, because later on I was looking for one of my remotes, because my little boy would sometimes put the remotes under the couch,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking under there and I was like, oh my gosh, man, because I saw it broke, and I thought, there's no way that happened any other way than that,
Uh-huh. Well, you said you heard it cracking and banging.
I heard it cracking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like all of a sudden, just as soon as it happened, it stopped and everything was back to normal, but I could barely breathe. So there's no way I could say anything, because I was thinking, oh, you just let me get the word Jesus out of my mouth, and
Right.
it's going to be on. And I couldn't even say anything.
Mm.
All I could do was think and look around and let it happen.
Right.
So
and it's
after
just
this,
steady. Hang on one second. I want to ask you. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you
Mm-hmm.
off, but I had to ask you a question.
No.
When
That's
he's
fine.
whatever is pushing you down, it's a slow, steady, like look what I can do kind of thing, right? I mean, it wasn't a fast bang.
It was intimidating.
Yes.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking.
It was intimidating me.
Right. But at the same time, you said that you actually were thinking these things. If you just let me say this, were you thinking prayer at all? Were you thinking anything like that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. At what point did it let you go? Did it just go away? Like poof? Or
it
was
wasn't like a long event. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it felt like forever.
Right.
But I knew in my mind that it was only just a brief I mean, it
Okay.
probably was like the whole incident would maybe been 10 seconds.
Okay.
But
Did
when
it
I,
dissipate slow, or did it just poof gone?
all of a sudden, all
Okay.
of a sudden,
Wow.
and I jumped up and ran, and like, I've never tried to run this fast, but I was running so fast that my legs would not coordinate with how fast my brain was saying, hey, we got to go. Okay.
Right.
And I was falling down the hall, and I got to the bed and told my wife, man, we got to pray, this terrible just happened, you know. And then shortly thereafter, I would say probably um, about a week, maybe. And it really, really messed me up because I was upset and I was scared because I thought, man, I can't tell nobody about this. I mean, when all this stuff happened, I never had any intentions of ever telling anybody about anything about it. Just my wife, you know. And I was kind of scared to, like, tell my pastor about it because I was like, man, I don't want him to think I'm on drugs or something, you know, because
Yeah.
it's just not normal, you know. But I was scared because, you know, my little boy, he was an infant, like just a little tot, you know. And I thought, man, if this thing can do this to me, I mean,
Yeah.
how can I even try to protect my child or my wife, you know? I was more scared for them than I was for myself.
I'm sure you were. Yeah. Wow.
But like the the second thing that happened was probably about a week after. Man, I was asleep on the couch again, and this time I was awoke by a voice, and usually my wife was usually good about coming and get me off the couch, and she'd just come and kind of gently shake me and say, "Come on, get in bed." And at first, my first reaction was, "Oh, that's just my wife waking me up." But I was awoke out of sleep by voices. Like, it sounded like I was in a busy shopping mall during Christmas. It was just like hundreds of voices chattering at the same time, and you couldn't make out what they were saying because there were just so many. It was just mumbling, really. And, you know, some of them sounded like whispers, and they were different, distinct voices, which is really weird. And I was kind of startled by that. And then when I opened my eyes, this thing was floating above me, like maybe 2 or 3 feet. And it was looking me right in the face. And it was real lofty, like it had a robe or a cloak, kind of like what a witch would wear, just long, flowing. I don't know if you ever watched Scooby-Doo as a kid, but you remember the phantoms they had in the ice cream factory? There was like a pink one and a chocolate one and a vanilla one. You know, their clothes. I know it sounds crazy, but
No, I remember. That's why I'm
I
laughing.
remember that episode too.
Yeah.
well, its clothes was like flowing, like it was like in water or wind blowing on it. You know? Like, it definitely had the spook factor. But its face was like a solid white, like a porcelain white. And it was, I don't even really know how to describe it, but the best way I can describe it is if you've ever seen like a Chinese New Year parade, how they have the little guys in the body of this dragon costume, and they're all moving up and down, kind of like it's crawling, you know. Well, it's got this gnarly look on its face, like a grimace, and its mouth was very distorted, like it was much larger than it should have been, you know. And it had a big, devious grin, kind of like a shark. It reminded me of a shark because its teeth were like curved, and just there was no form or like symmetry to it, like its teeth weren't uniform. It just looked like a bunch of sharp, twisted, needle-like teeth.
Oh.
but there were a bunch of them. And I guess that's what reminded me of a shark.
Mm.
But its eyes were like a flaming ember, like a coal. It was an orange colored eye, and it seemed like it was illuminated, like its eyes were glowing, and it had a pupil that run up and down like I don't know what that they call it, like an elliptical or something, like a snake's eye.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it didn't expect me to wake up, but when I opened my eyes, I mean, it was like the fright of my life, you know. This thing is the one thing that really got me.
Mm.
Because it was so terrifying looking. It was just, it was the thing of nightmares, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I opened my eyes, it got sucked backwards out of the room, like in a blitz, like instantly.
Mm.
Like it was on a bungee cord and it was being pulled back. And I mean, it was fast. And it was kind of like when I think back on it, I kind of think it was like oops, you weren't supposed to see this kind of incident, you know, because as soon as I saw it and realized, hey, this is something happening here,
mm-hmm.
that's when it was like, done, it's over.
Wow, honey. Oh, first of all, I'm real sorry you went through that. The whole time yes, I can imagine. And no, I can't. I can't imagine. People say that all the time, and you know, we can try, and then again, we don't want to. So I'm sorry you went through that, but the whole time
it was a real monster.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And yeah, I'm just really, I don't want to say, I want to get Steve's take on it first, because I've heard you tell me the story, you know, before briefly, a little bit about it. And I see this whole picture of you, you know, what you're going through and everything. And I've got an idea, and I know, I'm pretty sure you do as well. What do you think, Steve? I mean, I want to get your take on it first.
I'm afraid to go to sleep now.
I know.
Yeah, I've had some instances of sleep paralysis where the only way I could break it was to pray in my mind, but never anything like that. I've never seen anything. I felt like what I consider an evil presence or an aura, but I would lose my mind, I think, if I saw something like that looking at me. The paralysis itself is scary enough, let alone, you know, some demonic entity like that right in your face. That would, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be afraid to go to sleep.
It leaves you in that, it's one thing to sit and listen to something that someone else has been through. And Steve and I do that a lot, and, you know, I do it an awful lot. But I try to look at the person. Everybody who listens to my show knows I'm a little bit sensitive. It's nothing that I lean on or anything like that, but I just got to go with my natural gut instincts. And the first time you told me the story, and I'm listening to the energy of your voice, and I'm listening to the whole thing, my first thought, of course, was about your wife and your child. That's your first thing when you're a parent. When you're a good parent, that's just the first thing you think of. The second thing is, Stephen, I know you a little bit enough to know the kind of person you are. And I'm thinking, there's an old thing, how do they phrase it? In shamanism, which is basically, I'm talking more Native American, there are things you go through to face bad, to go through bad, to get you strong, to not get to the good, but it strengthens you to the point of now you can help others out of it, if you know what I mean. You know, does that make sense?
Whole reason.
This is what I'm saying. I'm kind of
Okay.
choosing my words careful, but I really think, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to say it before you do, just so you know what I'm thinking. I really think that you have this wonderful, good, it's that honest goodness. Do you know what I'm saying? It comes from your whole heart. You know, you meet people that are good and do good things and do kindness for others and things like that. Even a little deeper with you. And I really think that it's possible that being in the factory, going through what you went through with the boss and having to deal with that and opening up, it's like I say all the time, like cracks in your windshield. And people don't think that's something that little that we're so used to, because now in today's day and age, we're so used to hate and being angry and, you know, just fighting and just, you know, the society has come a little bit too far in that, I think. And I do it too, you know, but you do weaken yourself a little. It might have been just enough, like something was harboring outside or whatever, just to test you a little bit. If you know what I mean.
I've got a lot.
If you know what I mean.
More to tell you.
I know, but I'm just saying about this one
because
right.
Yeah, it comes full circle.
Okay,
I guarantee you, it all comes full circle.
I understand, and I'm sorry it happened. That part.
Oh, it's horrible.
I know, babe. I know. Go ahead.
But like, you know what you were saying about, you know, things happen to help others. I totally agree with that, and it's the whole reason why I share these experiences, because you know, there's a way to put a stop to things. At least, you know, in my situation it is, because, you know, as I'll tell you in a moment, I know exactly why these things happen. But I had some other experiences shortly after, you know, the incident with the white face, whatever it was. You know, you know, kind of my mind usually goes instantly to, hey, these things are demons, because, you know, it's just, I can't help but to think that way, because it's just the lens through which I see the world and perceive things, you know. But really, when it all boils down to it, I can't tell you what the shadow thing was. I can't tell you what the white face thing was. You know, I don't really know if anybody can, because there's just some things in this world that's a Deuteronomy 29:29, which is that's my preaching scripture for things that I don't understand. It says the secret things belong to the Lord our God. That's kind of a dig yourself out of a hole scripture, but
yeah, I got you.
So shortly after this incident, I started experiencing these crazy dreams at night, and there's some other things that happen, you know, in between these incidents that are, you know, I had another experience where the thing crept up on me while I was asleep. You know, I was kind of snuggled up to my wife, and this thing kind of crept over my shoulder again and was trying to take me away, man. And I could feel an arm or something go up under my back, and it kind of arched me up in the bed, and I got that frozen feeling. I mean, I was physically arched up in the bed like something was kind of lifting me up, and I'm a pretty big fella. And at that moment, it was like I was instantly taken out of my body and was walking down the hallway. And at this point in time, we had two little dogs, a poodle and a Pekingese. And at night, we kept them in a little pen in the hallway, you know, so that they won't, you know, have an accident on the carpet or something. And my dog saw me, man. Like when I walked by the dogs, now at this point, like I'm outside of myself, okay? And you know, it's weird. It's weird, I know. But when I was walking down the hallway, I felt like I was under a cloak and was just being propelled down the hallway and was up under like a hood or something. And I looked over and recognized my dogs, and it startled them. Like they jumped up and kind of started gruffing a little bit, like they recognized it was me. But, I mean, obviously they've never seen me like that, okay?
Yes.
And I can't really explain this. And this is kind of one of the things that it's just weird. But at this point, whenever the dog saw me and kind of started grizzling and gruffing, you know, like at this point, I'm right back in myself in the bed, and the thing drops me. And when it dropped me down, my wife kind of jumped up and was like, "What are you doing?" Like, I mean, she recognized that, hey, I was doing something, you know.
Something happened, yeah.
Something had happened. But one night, shortly after that, I was outside looking up at the stars and talking to God, and this black triangle just flies right over my house. And I mean, it was, I know people have heard these stories before, but it was a black triangle, and it was really big. And it was probably, I don't know, I'm not good at guessing dimensions and heights and everything, but I would say it was probably about 300 or 400 feet above my house. And it was probably about the width of a football field in all directions. Like it was an equal triangle. It was a perfectly equal triangle. All sides were equal. And it was real blocky looking, but smooth around the edges. Like curved around the edges, but like a wedge of cheese. Like, you know, and I would probably say it was about 20 or 30 feet thick. There were no lights, there were no windows, there were no propellers, there were no rocket boosters or fire coming out of the back of it like you would expect. And it was completely silent. And it was moving slow. And let me tell you, I had enough time to go in my house and get my phone 3 or 4 times. But I was so shocked and amazed. Like when I saw this, I was really excited because everybody really in their back of their mind thinks, well, man, I would love to see something like that.
Yeah.
But it was just mind blowing. I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. And I mean, it traveled right up Highway 72 towards like Tupelo. And now this is the crazy part. As this thing was leaving, when it passed over my house and got maybe 100 yards past my house, I blinked my eyes, and then it was just a formation of ducks.
What?
In a perfect V. Yeah.
Wow.
Just like flipping a switch.
Wow.
It's crazy.
It is. It is, but I'm certainly not calling you crazy, because I guarantee somebody listening to this has had the same type of thing.
Everybody's a little crazy.
Yeah. Especially.
I mean, I'm not like seeing things crazy. I'm definitely not that kind of person.
And I hate to play Me Too here, but when I lived in Vegas, I had an experience so similar. It was almost like he was telling my story in parts of there. I was down south end of the Strip one night, just below Mandalay Bay. There was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I worked in a casino, and I was on my way home, and I stopped off to get something to eat or something. And when I drove out toward the mountains there, I saw this, like he described it, was a perfect black triangle. And even when you said the length of a football field, that was already echoing in my head. That's the way this was. Couldn't really tell how high it was, and it was moving very slow. I mean, not even the speed of an airplane or anything like that. It was almost like it was floating. But it wasn't bobbing up and down or anything. It was just in a straight line. Totally silent. There were no lights, nothing on it. And this one, as I stood there looking at it, suddenly it just went straight up. I mean, there was no whoosh, no pop, no bang, nothing. It was, huge right above me 1 second, and then the next second it looked like a tortilla chip up in the sky. It was that small, and then it was just gone. And I didn't have time to react or take out a phone or anything, but it's almost exactly what you described as the shape and the movement and the lack of any kind of noise or any lights or anything. And
I wish I would have had the thought of mine to come into the house and get my phone. I wish if I would have and took a picture of it, it would have been like, that's the one. Mm-hmm. That's the picture that really is the whole enchilada.
But I can tell
you know what? And I thought about it. I thought about getting my phone, but I thought, I don't want to miss this.
Yeah.
I mean, really, in my mind, I know people are going to be like, you should have got your phone, man.
Yeah, that was me. I just stand there with my jaw hanging open, But again, this was Las Vegas, and, it's not that far from Area 51, so sometimes you'd see some weird stuff in the sky. So that was what I kind of chalked it up to. But this is strange.
There's a couple
story.
things. Yeah, there's a couple things I would say, too, because I know that Stephen is not far from Huntsville.
Redstone.
Yeah, Redstone Arsenal. That's where I was stationed, and I can't even remember the name of it. I was stationed there for so long. But, that's one thing. Because people would ask, is he by a base? Yes, he is. However, we don't know. I mean, it could be something that we have and they haven't told us yet. I hear a lot about that, and I am in no way versed even in UFO stories and things like that. I've heard some.
When I saw this thing,
I
thought, this is beautiful, and this is impressive. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I've seen a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I grew up near the airport, and we had, jet shows and stuff when I was a kid. And I've always loved stuff like that. I mean, I'm really impressed by engineering and things that humans build. And when I saw this, I said, I am impressed. This is impressive. Because, and I also thought later, how many of these things are flying around all the time and nobody
knows it?
Blends right in. Doesn't
if I hadn't looked up, I never would have seen it. Never would have known it was there.
Or heard it.
Make any noise or
right.
There was nothing to hear.
Or heard it. And what he said at the end, though, is what's got me thinking, too. I mean, my point is, I know the military has things that we don't know they have. That's for sure. And if we do hear something about, or see it in a movie or something like that, they've had it 10, 15 years. Steve and I have talked about that all the time.
Yeah.
And I was in and around Redstone Arsenal. I was a truck driver. I was a VIP driver. I was, I lived there, did extra training there. And I could tell you it was all over that base. And just because I didn't see anything like that doesn't mean it wasn't there. There's bunkers all over that place. And I'm telling you, that is a huge base. There is just, forget about it.
But for it to turn... For it to turn into a formation of ducks.
That's something I don't think we have.
Yeah, that's like maybe a cloaking device or
that's what I was thinking.
To project a hologram or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
I
super
thought,
impressive.
Yeah, I'm thinking when you said it though, that's what makes me think more of not something we have, but more extraterrestrial, being the fact that they didn't actually have to turn into that. They just had to make you think they did. Do you see what I mean? Like put it into your thought process.
It happened when I blinked my eyes. Like, somebody saw it. Time to flip on the switch.
It's very possible.
It's crazy.
It's very possible.
Almost like reminds me of Whitley Strieber's books when he talked about some of his encounters. He would remember an owl, and even though it was there was no owl or anything around, but he said that's what they were putting in his mind to distract him.
Exactly.
You didn't see an alien; you saw an owl.
That's what makes me believe it even more. Not that I have any problem believing this. I do. I believe it wholeheartedly. But that to me just makes it even more believable. The most unbelievable thing about it makes it more believable to me, if that makes sense.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I've seen some things too, honey. I understand. We're all believers here tonight. I'm telling you that right now.
Oh, yeah.
You go ahead.
It's good to be in good company.
You go. But do you see why I have Steve here? Because I have mentioned very little about this to Steve. Very little. I gave him some bullet points. That's it. But he just has met so many people and heard so many stories and saw so many things and so many experiences himself that tonight you're here to help the listeners that get to listen to this now and maybe down the line. That it's going to always be on the internet.
And that's amazing.
And he's here to back
somebody
you up.
that I've never met, never talked to, tell a story that's so similar to something I've experienced that he could be telling my story almost. I mean, there's some subtle differences in there, like the geese. That's absolutely mind blowing.
It is. It is.
And it's crazy because we're not the only ones, and it spans all walks of life. I mean, I'm a minister, man. I'm a hospice chaplain. I know. And I have no books to sell. I have nothing to gain.
Right.
Feeling it.
I know, but that's just it. I think it's just so cool. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, and the stories that you're telling, and then Steve has got this backup, and it's almost like he's here to not just validate, with his own experiences, but give you a little bit of what you're trying to give other people. I think that's cool.
That's what it feels like sometimes. What he said, that happened to me, but it did, So it would be a disservice to Stephen and to the listeners if I just sat here and didn't say anything.
Exactly. And I think it's wonderful. I think it's supposed to be this way for some reason. I think it's awesome. You continue your story, darling. You saw, were telling me that they turned into geese, which is just mind-blowing, but go ahead.
Yeah, after this, I was just jazzed about it, and I was like, man, gosh, I want to tell everybody about this, but, being a leader in a church and, have a professional job where, I deal with people in the hardest parts of their lives, and, it's kind of hard for me to just go around telling things like this, because people are like, man, those Steve's cheese has slid off the cracker a little bit.
Cheese went right off your cracker.
I get that look sometimes, that kind of sidelong glance, like,
And then with everything happening in such a short span, I kind of started thinking my cheese has relocated too. I thought this is something crazy. Well, after that incident, I started having these very realistic, repetitive dreams, and it happened every night. And this is how it would go, and it was the same thing every night. And I don't dream. I'm not a dreamer, in the sense of, having elaborate scenarios while I'm asleep and fantastic things. I've never been a dreamer. I've had some dreams that are, like the one where you're in a fight with somebody and you can't hit them, or the one where your teeth are falling out. I've had those common recurring dreams, but everybody does, So, anyhow, I started having this dream, and this is how it would go. I would be asleep in bed, then all of a sudden I would open my eyes, and these things would come through the wall, and there was one for each arm and one for each leg and a leader. There was one guy who oversaw it. And when I'm seeing this, I'm not seeing it from my perspective. I'm seeing it from the corner of the room, and it's almost like watching a movie. So these things would peek through the wall. They would at first start out with just a head or two, and they would peek through the wall and look around to make sure the coast is clear. Then that's when they just came right on through the wall. One of them would grab me around the arm, one would grab the other arm, one would grab a leg, and one would grab the opposite leg, and the other one would just stand there and oversee things. That's just how I perceived it. He was like the leader of the other four. And just as soon as they grabbed me and lifted me up, out the wall I would go. And I mean, when I went through it, it was like I didn't feel nothing. It's like it wasn't even there.
Mm.
And what was startling about it is when they would grab my arms and legs, it was very painful. Like they were grabbing me way too hard. Like if somebody grabs you up and wants to fight, how they'll just grab you. And like it would pinch my skin. And I have to describe what they looked like. They were very skinny and emaciated. They were skin and bone, which is what startled me, because when they grabbed me, it was like I ain't never been grabbed that hard. Like it was like a strong, mighty man grabbed my arm, and it hurt really bad. Like they had no care or finesse about how it affected me or how I felt about it. And they would take me right out. And when I went through the wall, I would be able to look up and see the stars. And then after that, there's nothing else. That's like when it ends.
Whoa.
Well, like their arms and legs were very lanky. Like it almost looked like a bone with like a chicken cutlet for a muscle. Like it was a very weak and it's almost no musculature at all, if that makes any sense.
Ugh.
And then it just looked like skin stretched tightly across it. And you could see their rib cage and their stomach sunken in. And I mean, I really hate to use this analogy, but if you've ever seen video footage of like the concentration camps during World War II,
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly how they look. Like they had like the real naughty knees, and they were just almost nothing at all, just very emaciated and weak looking, like they've been starved.
Mm.
Well, their skin was very bright and glowing. If you've ever seen the movie Cocoon, you know how they had a glow about them?
Yes.
It wasn't that bright, but you could tell that they were shiny, like they were illuminated almost. And their faces, I mean, they didn't look like a traditional bug-eyed commercial gray alien, okay? Their heads were a little bit larger than a human head, and they had a jaw and real sunk-in cheeks. You know, it was almost like they were making a fish face, almost like their cheeks were sucked in. They had teeny tiny mouths, and their nose kind of it wasn't pointy. It was real blunt and almost flat on their face. And you could see two little nostrils, but their eyes is what killed me. Their eye sockets were very large, like probably bigger than a human eye socket, but their eyeballs were teeny tiny. It looked like a little bit larger than an M&M, like maybe the size of a dime. And for some reason, it reminded me of like a catfish eye. It was just a little black dot. And then around their eye sockets was very dark. It almost looked like it had oil smeared, like motor oil smeared around its eye. It was a very wet, oily look around their eyeball. And they were just dead looking. In the face, they had just a dead, expressionless, blank look. They never showed emotions. They never talked. It was just pretty much like business to them, to me. And I didn't have any idea of reasoning behind why they were doing this. But their fingers were very long is what surprised me, because like when they grabbed my arm, their fingers wrapped all the way around, like almost overlapping. and same with my legs. And what the most surprising part about it is, and my wife she can attest to this. Every morning when I woke up, I had marks and bruises on my body that coincided with where they grabbed me. And I mean, it was obvious that it was a handprint, but they looked weird. It looked like very long fingers were wrapped around my arm, like a vine almost. And I had these marks that kind of looked like, some of them were like, I don't know, like a paddle or something. Like they were always little red, like pinprick looking dots, and they were all in a straight line, and they were probably about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 rows, and it was like they were perfectly symmetrical, and it went all the way across my back, and then I had another spot, like on my side, that was like an upside down triangle, and it started at the top. They were like 6 red dots, then 5 red dots below that, and then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, like a perfect triangle. And it almost looked like a tattoo.
Wow.
But it went away, after a day or two, just as long as it takes something to heal or go away.
Right. Were they painful at all? Did they have any
No,
kind of
not at all.
sensation, burning, anything like that?
I didn't even know they were there.
Right.
Wow.
And
Like my wife is the one who told me that. Like when I woke up the first morning after these dreams started, like my wife don't ever use foul language, never, for nothing. When I got up to brush my teeth and got out of the bed, like she just kind of sat up, like at full attention, and was like, "What the bleep happened to you?"
Wow.
And
Wow.
I said, "What do you mean?" And that's when I looked, and I had bruises. I mean, it was everywhere, on my arms, my legs, and then I had fingerprints. Like it looked like somebody just kind of touched my shoulder, and then touched my chest, and just single fingerprints.
Fingerprints. Wow. Was there like the same number of fingers as humans, or were there less? Do you know?
I mean, I didn't know.
Okay.
I don't really remember.
Okay.
And I mean, when I saw all that on my body, it didn't even occur to count them or nothing.
And you said in this dream state, which may or may not have been a dream state, they just carried you right through the wall. Like as soon as they all had you, you went through the wall.
They lifted me up.
And you could see the stars.
I could see the stars. And it was cold. I remember when I went out, it was around winter time, and it don't get too awful cold here in Alabama, but we do have, a sad little winter, but I remember distinctly something that just always stood out to me is that I felt the cold sensation, like when I went out the wall, and I mean, I went right through the sheetrock and the
That's wild.
bricks, and when I was looking up, I mean, at this point, I know I said that whenever, I had this dream, or maybe not a dream, I would see it from afar, like in the corner of the room. But as soon as it went to outside, I mean, it was just like a movie. It was almost like you would film a movie, At that point, I saw it from my personal perspective.
Okay.
And I saw their faces looking down at me. And then I, was facing up, and I'd see the stars bright, and it was just, a beautiful night, clear night. And when I went through the wall, freezing cold. I mean, just terribly freezing cold. And I don't usually get cold, but when you're outside in 35-degree weather in your boxer shorts,
right,
it's cold,
Yeah.
I can feel the cold on my skin.
And it didn't last very long. Like once you started seeing the stars and everything, you just kind of blacked out. It's over.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was a wrap at that point. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
no memory of coming back through the wall or anything. You
Nope.
just woke up and wow, that's
woke
amazing.
up.
Yeah.
Blanked out.
What do you got there, Steve? I'm like,
don't
whoa.
have a me too on that one. Now I'm afraid to go to sleep again here.
Yeah.
That's
How long did this last,
incredible.
Stephen? How long did this last? I
Uh,
mean, how many times
I
do you
had those
think?
dreams. You mean like how long did the incident last?
How many
to go out?
times, like, over a time span?
Oh, probably about 3 or 4 times.
Okay. Wow. And they never, to your knowledge, you said they had no expression, really. They weren't showing. They were all
Nothing.
business.
All
Did
business.
you ever see them communicating with each other, like looking at each other and then
Nope.
something would happen? Nothing like that.
Never heard a sound out of them. They were
Mhm.
just very cold and calculated.
Hmm.
Like,
All
we're
business.
just going to take you, and that's how it's going to be.
And you
Well,
said
Never
when
said any
they were skinny, I totally get the
terribly.
picture. Did it look like they had ribs? You said like around the rib
Yeah,
cage.
yeah.
It looked like
Yeah.
they had something like ribs. Wow.
They had ribs. They had a
Naughty
navel.
knees. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
maybe
no.
it's like some kind of human alien hybrid. Or
Hybrid.
something like
Yeah,
a
that's what I was thinking.
worker drone or
I don't
something.
know.
Yeah,
They were humanoid
Uh-huh.
type. I mean, they had bilateral arms and legs and
Right.
a torso, but I didn't see no, genitalia
Uh-huh.
because I looked because I don't know why, but
I looked.
I did zoom it. I looked,
Yeah.
but
Wow.
they had navels, and that's something
weird.
that stood out
Yeah.
weird to me. They did have a navel.
Could be like a hybrid or something like that. Like you said, like
Yeah,
a
it would-
worker, like a drone worker bee. They say a
They
lot of the
didn't have
grays are like that.
Movie where they've got all these like babies in jars of
Right.
green liquid that are growing in there. They always have an umbilical cord. So that's what it sounds. Because other than the description of the beings, it's typical abductee experience.
Yes.
And
But
they didn't
that's
have hair.
fascinating with the
There
humanoid.
was no
that he's
no
describing.
hair.
Uh-huh.
They didn't have ears,
Okay.
and their skin was. It was kind of hard to see a lot of detail because it was kind of glowy.
Uh-huh.
It was glowing kind of, and but I did see veins underneath the skin.
Wow. That's something.
Yeah.
Now, I have heard people being taken right through a ceiling, right through the second floor, being able to see, like, if they were downstairs and there was a second floor, going right through that ceiling and right through the floor, seeing other, like, kids, or whoever in the bedroom, they were being pulled through and right out the roof. And then after they got, like, past the roof or whatever,
They
seeing the stars or whatever, and then boom, just like you. That's when they lost it. But they remembered being pulled through. I haven't heard anybody being carried out. But then again, I don't know. Have you, Steve?
Not in that fashion with the one being on each limb like
Uh-huh.
that. That's pretty unique too.
Yeah.
But now I've heard people like going out of the window or like you said, just going up through the roof. But
Uh-huh.
haven't heard about anybody going through a wall and actually experiencing passing through the sheetrock and the brick and all that. That's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
wow.
So you're not alone, Stephen. You know what I mean? Did you ever
Well,
have?
I've heard similar.
Yeah, exactly. Did you ever have other than your wife? Did you ever have the marks looked at? You said they went away pretty quick, huh?
They did just as long as a bruise generally takes to.
Right. And the
go
little
away.
pinpricks and stuff too. They went away.
Yeah.
The shapes. Wow.
It's all gone away. And I mean, I would have taken pictures, and it would have been very compelling evidence for
Yeah.
what I'm telling you. But during that time, I never had any intentions of ever telling anybody
Right.
about it. So
I
didn't
understand. Well, see,
see
the
the
thing
need
is you've said that a couple times about taking pictures, and darling, I don't know if that it would help. Because, you could have had a
Probably
picture of that thing going right over you, turning into birds on video, and everybody would
Yeah.
just say you did it on CG.
That's CGI or
Right.
Photoshop or After Effects.
But,
or whatever.
don't kick yourself about that, because that's just, you have marks and stuff like that. I had some sent to me the other day, and I'm just like, oh, gosh, that's awful. But, it's just,
It looked like I was beaten.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
there's just bruises everywhere.
yeah.
Wow.
Well, I think that would scare me more than anything else, because you can tell yourself it was just a dream, And then when you have that validation where the marks are right
Got
where,
to the marks, and
that's
patterns, and
that's the moment,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can understand that completely. And after that, it just stopped, or was there something more with that?
Well, this is this is the big conclusion. This is where we're going to come full circle with everything.
Okay.
After this started happening, I was probably more distraught and scared and upset than I've ever been in my life. And I remember coming home from work, and then like it just happened that when I pulled off the highway, my wife was behind me, like she had left work a little early, and that just usually never happened, you know. So at the time, my mom was watching my little boy while we was at work. So she pulled in behind me off the highway to go home. And I mean, I was really upset. I just couldn't stop thinking about things, and I just was like, this has got to stop, because it's, you know, it was too much for me. It was just about to the point where I was like, man, I can't keep this up. And I thought, man, if this stuff's happening to me, I mean, is this happening to my kid? Is it happening to, you know, and it was stuff that I physically on my own, there's nothing that I could do about any of it.
Yeah.
I couldn't physically fight those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not so sure that it would have done any good if I could have. Because, I mean, all these creatures, whatever they are, they all had access to something that I didn't. Like, you know, they were able to render me completely physically unable to move. And that was really upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing things to me while I was asleep. I mean, you can't defend yourself in your sleep, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it makes me mad, because it's kind of a low down, dirty way to
yeah.
go about things. It's not fighting fair, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So for some reason, when my wife got behind me, I just started crying. I thought, you know, I just thought, I just prayed. I said, God, you've got to help me. You got to stop this. And I prayed and I prayed. And whenever we pulled into the carport, I felt like I got struck by lightning. And it was the same feeling as when I had that incredible experience with God. And it was like, you know, I can't tell you how just powerful it felt. Because I really felt like, you know, he touched me. You know, when I got out of the car, man, I marched in my house and I started laying it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I rebuked everything in the name of Jesus. I just said, it's over from now on. And I mean, from that moment on, I've not even heard a board creak in my house. And it's been peace.
Yeah.
And we got another kid too.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, man. And you know, I give all glory to God. You know, doctors told me and my wife that neither one of us was able to have children, and we got 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in talking about my boss, I want to tell you this right quick. After all this happened, and everything was behind me, I started hearing at work that the boss that, you know, give me a hard time and harassed me all the time, this girl come up to me one day and she says, and this is her exact words, but she said, I'm going to call him Tony.
Okay.
But she said, yeah, that Tony's a real turd, isn't he? That's what she said. And I was like, yeah, he's pretty tough, you know. And she said, well, I'll tell you this, but, you know, don't spread it around here at work, you know. Some people knew and some people didn't. And she said, maybe this will help you to understand a little bit about why he's the way that he is.
Mm-hmm.
She said that he had a son, teenage son, that came home from school one day. He got right off the bus and just went into his room and shot himself.
Oh,
wow.
And which is terrible.
Yeah.
Like at that point, you know, and me being a new dad and having my own little boy, man, it crushed me.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought to myself, man, that is a real nightmare. That's worse than any of all this stuff I went through. To think, man, gosh, that's terrible. And he's the one that come home and, you know, found his son that way. And, you know, back then they didn't have people to call that would come and, you know, take care of, you know, what's left over and stuff, you know. Mm-hmm. So him and his wife had to, you know, clean everything, and
that'll break a man. That'll break you.
That's
oh gosh.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I really feel like the Lord revealed to me that whatever it is that torments that guy every day of his life is the same thing, just like it followed me home and was waiting on me to be weak enough or at the right frame of mind for the door to be opened for it to come in my house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I firmly believe that all of these things are on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking that, especially as a preacher, you know, you have that calling on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that you have these trials and tribulations. Anybody does, but I think more so when you because of the way I've heard it described is that the faith of the congregation will never rise above the person in the pulpit. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you've got to go through that adversity and learn how to get that deliverance and protection and learn to walk in that anointing so you can witness to other people.
I was by myself on it, man, and I'm sure if I would have stood up and told my church, hey, look, I'm going through this, man, they would probably come to my house.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we fix to handle this. Because it's just, I mean, my church is like a family, man, and I love them all like my own family.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I went through all this, really just me and my wife, man. I was all alone on it because I was man, I don't. Well, you know, I wouldn't, but you know what I mean. Like,
I do, but I had to say it. No, you weren't. No, you weren't. But I just have so much that I could say right here, but I agree with Steve. I said in the beginning because I kind of had a feeling Steve was going to feel the same way. We're all in agreement here that, first of all, I have said it on this show once, and I have had lots of people come back, you know, and say, well, you said, you know, listen, it's my podcast. It's my guests. And I will honor their thoughts, and I will honor their beliefs, and I will honor the stories that they tell. But if you listen to my podcast, you are going to know that I believe that the tiniest pinpoint of light can brighten the darkest room. And I do believe in a higher power. I do believe in God, and I absolutely believe in Jesus. And I would rather disappoint you than disappoint him. So there you go. And as far as I'm concerned, there are, I've never seen anybody take as much twisting as you know, as he has. So I know who to call, and I've had to do it before, and I've never he's never let me down. So that's just as far as that goes. And I believe that moment when you were in that trial, you just had to get to the point where you realize, I mean, I know enough about you, Steve, that you were trying to fight all this. And Steve and I, I'm getting confused now, but Steve Stockton and I have talked many a time on this and said, look, if you don't believe in what you're saying, if you don't believe in what you're, you know, putting out there, if your heart's not in it, you might as well just throw a slipper at it because it's going to laugh at you. But when you really and truly believe, and for whatever reason you went through all of this, it got you to that point. Not to say you didn't believe before, you know.
Right.
But you get to that point where you were just overwhelmed and you hit your knees. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Away,
I've hit them before. I understand.
I think things like that are sent not to test your faith so much as to exercise it and to strengthen it.
Yes, exactly. Well put. Absolutely. And,
And,
it does all of us. It does all of us. It really does in a lot of ways. And I'm so sorry you went through all that.
I appreciate that. I know there's going to probably be a lot of people to hear this, and there's probably going to be a good bit of them, believers of some fashion. Or, but before all these things started to happen, I kind of had a sense of security that, well, hey, I'm a believer. Stuff like this don't, I don't have to worry about this. And listen, I know God is always with me. He walks with me through thick and through thin, through my failures, ups, downs, lefts, and rights. He never leaves my side. But I really believe that because I started having bitterness and something as simple, a lot of people don't even think about it. They just go around hating on folks. Like,
yeah,
I just hate that guy just because, okay? But they have no idea what it really can unleash on them, whether you're a believer or not. Because even though I'm covered and I'm protected by God, there are things that you can go through that sometimes is your own doing. And, that's the whole reaping and sowing principle. I just never had any idea that it could be like that.
I agree.
And that law of sowing and reaping, the thing a lot of people don't realize about that is, as you sow, you shall reap. But when you plant a kernel of corn, you don't get a kernel of corn back. You get a stalk with several ears with hundreds of kernels on it. So
Yes, sir.
Be careful what you're sowing.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Isn't that right? That's right. And, and that's
good and bad.
And that's something too, for the people out there. I don't want to feel, I never want anybody to feel left out, when we're talking about this, because there are people in different stages of their understanding.
Sure.
There is different people in what their belief is and where they get their strength from. How, and I think that's great, because everybody should, be free to.
Well, God loves them too.
I know that. I absolutely know that without a doubt. But that's what I'm saying is I don't want to exclude them, because a lot of times people get their strength from, they'll say higher power, their inner self or their higher self and stuff like that. And they don't realize that I honestly believe that it's really all correct. But you've got to get down when you're dealing with something that follows, I don't want to say rules, but follows certain limits and, things that they can do. You better be using the right tool. And if you're going to deal with pure evil, you better be dealing with pure good to fight it.
You got that right.
And that's the best way I can put that, because, you can. I'm Native American. I've gone to Pentecostal church. I've gone to Catholic church. I've gone to temple.
Yep, same here.
I've gone to temple. I've sat on the mountain. I've gone to drum circles. And I've felt wonder and good in all of it. I've, have Wicca friends and all this other stuff. And they all have something, and they feel like they're pulling from the same energy. You know what I mean? But boy, I'm telling you what, there are just times where you better, you want to talk military terms, you're going to go into battle, you better get your howitzers out. I will call on my angels. I will call on everything that's good to bring in.
Yeah, and
I
all
understand.
But we're all in this together.
Absolutely, and we're all connected. Yeah. But, tonight we've gone the gauntlet as far as you've talked about. In fact, I know what we're calling this: the good, the bad, and the extraterrestrial. Because it's just... because
it's the good, the bad, and the something. That's
right. Because it is. It's all trials, and we're all going through that. And the main purpose for having this show tonight is for... When you said that about your church and your congregation, and, I've been to so many where I've just walked out and you walk in the door and you start dancing before you ever get a seat. You don't even bother getting a seat, throw your purse down and go with them. It's just a wonderful feeling. And like I said, I've had that in drum circles, and I've had that in other gatherings with people as well. It's just a gathering of goodness and love. It's awesome. But when you were saying that, I couldn't help but think, Stephen, how many people in that church were just like you and not saying anything? How many people were trying to go
that's
through
everywhere.
their own... I know. And going through their own stuff and trying to deal with it. I've had guests on this show, same thing. They were sitting in the pew and wanted to say something and were scared. So I can't thank you enough for coming out and saying, everything you've said tonight, because it's going to help somebody,
That's what my intentions are, and I pray that's exactly what happens.
Right. And I just think it's wonderful that the same thing happened to me. I was not supposed to be able to ever have, I've had several doctors tell me I would never have my son, my second. There was just no way it was going to happen, and here he is. So I understand exactly what you mean there. It's just, I've never been taken through a wall. And I hope I never see it, especially in my underwear in 35-degree weather. That is a nightmare.
Yeah, I'll pass on that one too.
Yeah, I pass. I'm good.
I hope you don't ever have to do that.
Does God say, just surround me now, because I don't need it. I'm right there with you. So I'm good. But it seemed to me, if it is true that we have a say in the life path that we choose, I'm a big believer in soul groups and and things like that, and trying to ascend higher and learn. If you chose a path, you sure chose a rocky one.
I did, man.
Yeah.
I would never choose to, like, growing up. Mm-hmm. Like, I play guitar. I play in a couple different bands, and I'm a rocker, man. I'm the rocking river.
I know you are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can't imagine.
And all my eggs were in the rock star basket all my life. Mm-hmm. So I never would have chose to. But I'm telling you, I would.
You're in the right part of the country for it. Muscle Shoals, just right there.
Yes, sir.
Got the Swampers.
Yes, it's a wonderful place. I miss Alabama so much in so many ways. I miss the kindness. I miss people. My sons still say, "Yes, ma'am." You know what I mean?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
That's exactly right.
They'll hold the door open. They'll be sitting there, and half the people, that they came with are already through, and they're opening for strangers, and they'll look at me, and I'll like, I raised them right, didn't I? The little things. People waving to you when you drive down the road and as you go by. And I can remember when my sons were little, they go, "You know him?" I'm like, "No, but I'm waving back." There's a kindness. There's a kindness there. And the whole time you're telling your story about the aliens, I'm thinking, well, at least he had a pretty sky to look at, because there's nothing like the Alabama sky. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. And I'm so glad you decided to come on. We sure had a road trying to get everybody together on this, but aren't you glad?
It took long enough.
Aren't you glad?
It was worth all the adversity that we had to face to finally get together.
Well, that just goes along with the show.
Sometimes time is not on your side,
Yeah, and sometimes it's right on time, and I think this episode was right on time. I mean, I love you both for being here.
I think it happened when it was supposed to, and somebody's going to hear this, that this is exactly what they need to hear.
And maybe somebody else, if you're in a group, trusted people, if you're afraid to tell the people that you work with, or something like that, reach out. If it's not to this show, like on our Facebook page, we have the Gatekeepers. You can come on, you can discuss things there and feel okay about it. You're not going to be ridiculed. Talk to somebody. You don't even have to give your name, but get it out, because once you get it out, you kind of look at it.
My emails and the end of all my books, I get lots of letters that I never discuss with anybody because people ask me not to. But I'm willing to listen.
Yes.
Lend advice if I can. There's all kinds of people that have all kinds of experiences.
And don't suffer in silence. Reach out, for Pete's sakes, reach out to your higher power and ask for that help, because I think that's the whole theme of tonight's show. It's we can go through so much, we can ignore so much, and we can keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper. But, sometimes, and a lot of times, you got to reach out for help to something that's stronger than you to pull you through. And you come out on the other side just fine, huh?
I did.
Yeah.
I couldn't be happier.
Isn't that wonderful?
Life's good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. And it just proves again, I don't know if you know Bill Bean, my friend Bill Bean. I just love him.
I do.
Oh,
I've
God.
talked with him.
Oh, I just love him. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall on that conversation, because he's
It was email. We
email.
talked over email.
But he's wonderful. He's just wonderful.
He's very approachable too. That's what's
Yes.
cool is.
Yes,
you know,
because he was in that position. He had nobody. Can you
L.A.
imagine
Marzulli.
kids?
I've spoke with L.A. Marzulli.
Mhm.
He's a stand-up guy too.
Absolutely.
Very approachable.
Absolutely.
Prayed with me on the phone.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And Charles Anthony, same. You know, this is a group of people who have been there. They have, these people that keep coming on this show and that I keep getting connected with, these are people that have walked, they've seen the dark, they've seen the light, and they know where they want to be. And it's just, there's no games, there's no playing, there's no making up stuff. You don't have to add things to these stories. They're frightening.
I had somebody contact me just last week that was coming to get some kind of demonic power. Cisco, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
I referred to Bill Bean and Charles Anthony both. So haven't heard anything back yet, but I'm interested to see how that turns out.
I can tell you right now, I get them all the time, and I have this, what I call my, chain of paranormal protection and help, basically, because there's so many links in it. And, Stephen, you're a part of that now, just helping other people. Somebody needs somebody to talk to, and I vet them.
Send them my way.
Yeah, and that's just a wonderful thing, because now you don't have to be alone anymore. And I cannot thank you, my friend, for being on here and telling your story. Steve, do you want to tell a little bit about your books real quick, too, so we don't forget about that?
Sure. Appreciate the plug. Strange Things in the Woods and More Strange Things in the Woods, collections of true stories that I collected over the years. And then I've got my own personal account of encounters, My Strange World, all available on Amazon. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. So that my email address is in all my books. I'll accept friends' requests from anybody, and love to get emails from my listeners.
Terrific.
And Stephen, it was a pleasure talking with you, sir. I've had just a wonderful time.
Pleasure is all mine, sir, and it's an honor.
And I promise you, in my word of honor, I got my hand up, Girl Scouts honor and soldier honor, you name it, I'm saluting. I did not set that up. I had no idea, Steve. I know a lot of Steve's stories, but I don't know them all. And I just think that's wonderful that he had a little bit that he could validate and give you a little bit of something, too. That's awesome.
Yeah,
it's a good
like I said, I hate to play me, too, but it'd be disservice to Stephen and the people listening if I didn't say I've had something similar happen, or I know somebody that has a similar story.
Well, it was really neat to sit here and hear it happen, and I just think it's wonderful, and I think it was meant to be, and I can't thank you both enough. So I'm going to just say, I'm going to say good night, but I'm going to ask you both to hang on the line after we stop it here, because I got something to say to both of you. So thank you both so much for coming on, and we're going to do this again.
Always. I'm anxious to get this group together again.
Well, that was just amazing and so much fun, and I cannot thank Stephen and Steve Stockton for spending so much time with us tonight. I hope that reaches out and touches some listeners. And again, we reiterate, the light in the darkness, whatever your light is, just surround yourself with that and move through that darkness, because you gotta admit, man, it's out there. And there's just too many people going through experience after experience. And, that's just the one thing I've always found that works. So, you have the power within you to choose to push through it. And that's pretty amazing. Thank them both for being here tonight. Don't forget Steve Stockton. He's got all the wonderful different strange things in the woods and My Strange Life and some other books out there. They're available on Kindle. Don't forget you can be on our Facebook, Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal Podcast Gatekeepers page. That's on Facebook. Just come on in there. There's a couple of questions. That's no big deal. You don't have to answer any of them. Just put your member request in there and I'll get you in. You can ask your questions. You can talk to a great group of people there. They're gatekeepers for a reason. They're standing at the gate trying to answer as many questions as we've been able to, try to get some ideas and theories and things that we've learned along the way. Of course, nobody knows everything. There are really no experts out there. But at least we can help you try to understand a little bit about your experience and, just be, maybe find out together. Also, don't forget, we've got swag. It's not too early to think about gift giving and things like that. If you got somebody who likes podcasts, if you got somebody who likes ghost stories and stories of the uncanny and stories like tonight, which was a lifetime of experiences and things like that, get them a mug, with some chocolate in there. Get him a crispy pillow or our little Ghost Crispy, our little mascot. He's just into everything, and a lot of you don't know much about him, but that little guy's got so much personality. Just for a cartoon, he's got personality. See, he doesn't know that he's a ghost. So he's always in there, and we get guests like cowboy ghosts and things like that who dress all up, and he's been out there at ghost investigating and thinking live people were ghosts himself, and anytime he does come upon a ghost or something scary, he's trying to get away from it because, it scares him, so it's kind of funny. And he's on all kinds of things. He's on pillows and T-shirts and baseball tees. Those are my personal favorites. The hoodies. There's the little onesies for little toddlers and stuff. We've got posters and all our cover art. One of the most popular ones is Monsters with 1 and 2 because it's got the usual suspects up there. And it's just fun. Go through and look. It's at tpublic.com/user/Cisco, and the link will be in our show notes. And a little bit of that goes to help keep this podcast free. Right now, there are, there's always costs and things like that to, put up your home site to have your feed out there for all the different podcasts, and that helps us out a lot because it's just me here. You could do that, and I appreciate it very much. And think about, like I said, people that like ghosts, and get them some mugs and some coffee, or get them a T-shirt or a hoodie or something. And I thank you very much for those who have done that, stickers and things. I appreciate it very much, and I always appreciate you for listening. Also, don't forget, we've got the your code Cisco, SYSCO, for Scotty, the NJmedium.com. So Scott is a wonderful medium. He does fantastic Facebook lives on, I believe, Friday nights. Sometimes they're on Sunday, I believe, too. But just go in there and like his page on Facebook, and you'll be there when he pops up. Friday nights he does fun things. He tries different stuff out, pendulums and other things, and sometimes he does card readings for the people that are watching. You'll get to know Scott. And as fun and wonderful as he is 100% all business when it comes to readings. And you can go in there to his website, and you can, on his Facebook page as well, and see his reviews. Everybody puts the reviews up there. They're just astounded at the reading. And he's just a wonderful medium, and he's a really nice guy, too. He's very down to earth. He also is involved in PARS. He does house investigations, so he's in there. He's out in the field. He's getting to know, things daily. He's out there doing it. He's not just saying it. On his website, you see there's all for free. There's different ideas and guides on psychic development and mediumship and lots of other things on the blog. And Tammy Knighton sometimes writes in there too, and she puts in she's an angel reader, and she puts in her ideas. It's just a wonderful place to be if you have questions about this subject, and some really knowledgeable people to talk to. So there's all that. Don't forget, if you've got your own stories about the uncanny and ghosts or angels, we've got holiday season coming up. We're going to do a lot of shows on angels and miracles and the supernatural, which we think is going to be really cool for Christmas. Go ahead and send your story in, or contact me through journeythroughthegate@gmail.com. And we'll see if we can get some stories like that in. Also, your ghost stories, uncanny, UFOs. We had a very terrifying alien story tonight. We're not even sure what it was. I want to say alien, extraterrestrial. All of that. We want to get these stories out here so our listeners can match up, just like Steve and Steven tonight. They've never met each other, and they had stories that matched up, and it really did something for both of them when you can find somebody that's been through something like that too, and that's what this show is all about. So I thank you so much for listening. Also, I've had a lot of questions about the music for the podcast. That is original music written by Mario Cicerello for Journey Through the Gate. And the song is called Spirits Rescue. And everybody knows that's kind of what I'm about. It goes for people too. And if they want help, we should be giving it to them, at least trying to give them some assistance. Because if you were a spirit and you were lost and you needed a helping hand, wouldn't you want somebody to reach out? And that's kind of why I named that song that way, so we could remember that. But it's Spirits Rescue, and it's copywritten. It's all belongs to Mario, and I have full permission to use it. He wrote it for this show and for me, so I thank him for that. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for passing the podcast along and keeping us going and being so kind to each other. I appreciate that. And the last thing I can say, and the best advice I can give you, is keep those feet under those covers. Keep your closet doors shut, because there are things that go bump in the night.